I just want to welcome everyone to this vital session about the Land and Water Conservation Fund and the 30 by 30 campaign and Illinois' role in those initiatives. So I see a lot of familiar faces. I'm excited to kick you guys off and kind of catch you up. I think we probably have a varied amount of familiarity with these two campaigns, so I'm kind of really looking forward to all of our Illinois conservation partners being caught up and on the same page. If you don't know me, I'm Lindsay Keeney. I'm the Conservation Director at the Illinois Environmental Council. My colleague Elliot is also on. He's the Ag and Water Programs Director. And then our two speakers are Alex Terrell, who's with the League of Conservation Voters, and he'll be speaking about the Land and Water, he'll be speaking about the 30 by 30 campaign. And then we have Amy, who's with the LWCF Coalition, and she'll be speaking about the Land and Water Conservation Fund. So I will turn it over to our fabulous speakers. And then you, just really quick, you're more than welcome to throw questions into the chat. I'll be monitoring that. We're going to do a little question and answer session at the end. Hopefully we'll have some time for that. I'll stop jabbering so that we can save time for that, and I will help direct those questions when we get there.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to share my screen with you all, but I'll just start by introducing myself. I'm Amy. I'm actually with the Appalachian Mountain Club, but I work full-time coordinating the National Land and Water Conservation Fund Coalition, which I've been doing for a while, and working with partners all over the country, like yourselves, some of whom are deeply familiar with the Land and Water Conservation Fund and work on projects or have been advocates for many years, and some who care about the places that LWCF has protected or where the places that LWCF funding is needed to protect, but don't actually know much about the program and don't always make the connection between the places that they love and the funding that is necessary to protect them and provide public access. So part of my job is helping to connect those dots for folks like yourselves and for members of Congress. So I'm going to share my screen and do a few slides here. Let's see if that works. I hope everybody can see that. So yeah, we are working together. The Land and Water Conservation Fund Coalition is made up of hundreds of groups across the country, from big national groups to small local land trusts and other stakeholders, community organizations, businesses, all of whom care very much about parks and public lands and expanding access. And so I work to coordinate those voices and move legislation through Congress to fully and permanently fund this program, which is supposed to receive $900 million a year annually, but does not, which we will talk about. Let's see if I can advance my slides. There we go. So the Land and Water Conservation Fund is a program that we like to call the most important conservation and recreation program at the federal level in the US. We also like to call it the most important program that nobody's ever heard of. It has a really wonky acronym, and it is not marketed. Like when you go to a park that's protected by LWCF, you don't see a sign that says that. Sometimes actually, in limited cases you do, but most of the time you don't. So it's a 55-plus-year-old program that has been tremendously successful in protecting places all across the country, more than 44,000 projects across all 50 states, and pretty much every single county in America has benefited from these investments. It has a variety of kind of sub-programs under the LWCF umbrella, different tools that are used for different types of conservation and recreation programs or projects. From filling in the gaps in our national parks and national forests, which people don't realize that there's a lot of private land still within our national parks, national forests, national wildlife refuges, et cetera, to providing state grants that protect our state parks, local playgrounds, recreation facilities, greenways, bikeways, trails, all kinds of stuff. and then a variety of other programs that help protect working forests and all of the habitat benefits and drinking water benefits that come along with protecting forests. The Battlefield Protection Program, which is more of protecting historical sites, and various other sub-programs. So it's very flexible, it's very like ground up in that the needs are out there and folks submit these projects and they are ranked, and depending on how much funding is available, a great number of projects get done each year, but of course we would like to see more. So why does this program matter, and why does it matter specifically to Illinois? The types of programs the type of projects that LWCF funds are all about creating more access to the outdoors and access to recreation for all Americans. They're increasingly geared toward protecting water supplies, which are, you know, crunched by continued development, and wildlife habitat for the same reason. And then they also are increasingly really important for the outdoor recreation economy, which has grown and grown, even in times of recession. It is being sorely tested right now, like so many other parts of our economy. But in many communities, outdoor recreation is a real job creator, and it generates a lot of economic activity from gateway communities and national park areas, rural communities that are dependent on forest resources, and state parks in more urban areas. They're all tremendously beneficial for the economy. So Illinois covers a variety of landscapes, right? You have a lot of suburban sprawl where green space is increasingly at a premium. You also have the remnants of, of prairies. You have big national forests. You have great national wildlife refuges, a lot of historic sites. And, across the entire state, rural and urban, there's always a need for more close to home access to the outdoors and to recreation, which we have seen more than ever in the current crisis, where people are confined close to home and they are desperate to get outside, and there is a real shortage of places to go where people can spread out safely. So we have been able to see that. So I'll just run through a couple of examples from Illinois. The Lincoln Home on the historic side, Emaquan Chautauqua refuges on the natural habitat side, and some of the state grant recipient, including Hennepin Canal State Trail and Illinois Beach State Park, although there's thousands and thousands of state and local parks across the state that have benefited from LWCF. So I'm gonna stop there for a moment and just ask you all some polling questions so that we can kind of have a little bit of back and forth about this and get a sense of your experience with LWCF, and also, where in the state, because it's a big and diverse state. So it would be helpful to us to have a sense of where you work. So all over, really.
Mm-hmm. Southeast is missing. And then, yeah. And then we had one other question around what congressional district are you located in?
Yeah, I'm seeing them pour in 14th, 5th, 13th, 13th, 11th. Someone works in the 12th, 13th, and 15th. Open Lanes covers 10 districts, 12. I'm very proud that you all know.
Do folks have any questions, so far, before I get into the campaign, but about the program or particular places?
We'll have another time for questions after this second section, so.
Okay, well, I'm going to share my screen again and we'll talk a little bit about the campaign for full permanent funding of LWCF and where that stands in Congress. So there are all these places that have benefited from LWCF. There are so many more places that need need further investment, and there's so much continuing growth and development, population growth, and sprawl, that these needs really never let up. So this coalition of groups has come together to advocate for the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and we've been, doing this campaign for I've been working on it for an entire decade, to get full permanent funding for LWCF. So some of the challenges to this program, and some of the assets that the program has in a political sense as we're advocating for it. It's hugely bipartisan. It's nationwide. It involves, local places that folks love. It has a long history of success. There's something for everybody, whether you're a recreation user or a business owner or a timber company or a veteran or a land trust, or a Republican or a Democrat or a hunter, or what have you. There's something for everyone in this program, and that's part of the strength of our coalition. But it's also a huge challenge, because the support is very broad, but it's relatively shallow in that this is something that belongs to everyone, and so also kind of belongs to no one. There's no one champion in Congress who has made this his or her issue. There are many champions who have made it a big issue for them, but they're on both sides of the aisle. They're in different parts of the country, and sometimes they are working together on things, and sometimes they're working on their own. Likewise, there are partners across the country that are stakeholders, and many are very small, and it is a big challenge to coordinate all those different voices, and have everyone bring their own perspective to the table, and yet keep everybody, rowing in the same direction on the same message in a campaign. And also, as I said, the program's pretty obscure. It has a wonky acronym. There's a real branding problem that we have worked hard to try to overcome with communications tools that we push out to partners across the country. So we, as I said, have come together in a large coalition that has been pretty successful in increasing the visibility and educating folks about what this program is about, educating members of Congress, and broadening the support and deepening the support for the program, so that there are a lot of great champions who are willing to really fight for the program. And we try to let everybody use their own voices, but all come together around a single message, which is that this program works. It's flexible. It's something that just makes sense, and it's common sense, good reinvestment, and it pays dividends in a variety of ways. So we were able to permanently reauthorize this program through this campaign and through the coalition a year ago. Seems like forever. But that went a long way toward cementing the support for the program and bringing people together. And so we have tried to springboard off of that win to create the next win on permanent funding of the program. As I mentioned previously, LWCF is intended to receive $900 million annually. That money flows into the LWCF account from offshore oil and gas receipts. It's basically intended as a reinvestment. When you draw down one natural resource, you reinvest in other natural resources, so it makes a lot of sense. But Congress has to appropriate that money to actual LWCF conservation and recreation projects every year. And every year they have consistently appropriated less than that 900 million. So 900 million flows in, but it doesn't all flow out. And at times we have seen half or less of that funding actually go toward LWCF projects, and the rest disappears into the general treasury and is basically rated for other purposes. So that is what we are trying to stop by passing the LWCF Permanent Funding Act. So the LWCF Permanent Funding Act would fix that, and we have been campaigning for that bipartisan bill to pass. Just before the COVID crisis kind of really hit in March, we had gotten to a point where we were poised for victory on that. Some of the very vocal champions on both sides of the aisle had enlisted support from the administration, and there was a tweet from the president saying, you know, please send me a bill that has permanent funding of LWCF and also fixes the maintenance backlog in our national parks, which is another major problem that needs investment. And so members of Congress quickly responded to that request and combined the LWCF Permanent Funding Act with a proposal to fix the maintenance backlog in national parks into a bill called the Great American Outdoors Act. And it was actually on the Senate calendar and would have passed, and the House was ready to pass it. And then the whole world got shut down by the virus. So like everyone else, we are on hold. And however, the crisis has actually put into stark relief how important this is in the current circumstances. You know, people are, as I said, desperate to get outside. It's a really important part of our physical and mental recovery from this across many communities. It's also tremendously important to help the recovery of the outdoor recreation economy, which has been devastated by the shutdown in travel and tourism. So we have been continuing to engage members of Congress and talking about why this is terribly important and why it would fit in a stimulus or recovery package, which Congress is currently discussing at great length. And we have been trying to kind of keep that momentum going and be kind of situationally aware of what's going on, but you know, educate members as to how this is really relevant to the current situation. So we are still hopeful that the Great American Outdoors Act might be able to pass as part of a larger package or on its own sometime soon. And members of Congress are actually actively pressuring leadership to make that happen. And so our work at the ground level is to ramp up the momentum and the pressure on individual members of Congress to ask for this, to fight for this, to make it one of their priorities. So that they in turn will put pressure on leadership to find a path forward for the legislation, whether it's on its own or as part of a larger bill. So that's where things stand. And you know, we are constantly asking for the help of many partners across the LWCF Coalition and its supporters to keep that groundswell going. And keep members of Congress motivated. Many of the Illinois delegation are tremendously supportive on both sides of the aisle, but we really need them to make it a priority and kind of cut through some of the many other priorities that Congress has if we are to get this over the finish line. So there's a variety of ways that folks can help if they are able. And would love to talk more about that or any questions that you have.
I saw Nicole asked if there are any representatives on the Lieutenant Governor's Rivers Committee. And Nicole, I know you and I are both on that, but there's not official representatives of this fund. So all of us that represent and advocate would be those representatives. So it's our job to kind of advocate for that at that level. I saw Andrew and Elliot both did some really great work quickly taking your guys' poll results about which districts you're in and giving us a list of legislators. So we'll make sure we send out that list if anyone can use it as a follow-up I saw Elliot, we've got Caston, Foster, Bose, Davis, Underwood, Shimkus, Kinginger, Lipinski, Shuey, Quigley, Danny Davis, Krishnamurthy, Shikowski, Schneider. So I think we have a really good representation here on the webinar and on the call.
Yeah, and I just wanted to, Lindsay, if I could jump in for a second. One reason I was interested in seeing, you know, who the members are that represent you all, was so I could give a little summation. You know, all of the Democrats have been very supportive of LWCF, and some on the Republican side as well, including Kinzinger. Shimkus, I think a little bit less. Kinzinger has actually has signed on to a lot of things, Boast as well. So it's been a very bipartisan issue. And, you know, we usually lead with, when we approach the members, we usually lead with, thank you so much for your support of this program. You know, here's what's going on right now, and we really need your help to elevate it with leadership, and make sure they understand it's a priority for my district. So any kind of outreach along those lines is always helpful to any of these members.
Yeah, Paul just dropped in a media link that says Kinzinger has worked with and listened to my students, and he's got an article there. So I'm excited to capture this chat and kind of see the work that you guys are already doing and how it can complement each other. Andrew was asking what groups beyond the League of Conservation Voters are leading this LWCF Coalition and organization. So I don't, Amy, Alex jumped in and threw a couple out there: the Nature Conservancy, the Wilderness Society, Trust for Public Land, and he said many others. So if there's
many others. The Appalachian Mountain Club, of course, is one, my organization, and then the National Wildlife Federation. There are sportsmen's groups, there are conservation groups, there are business groups like the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable and the Outdoor Industry Association. Veterans groups have been very active because they've seen a lot of folks returning from deployment, using the outdoors as a means of coping with their re-entry into civilian life. And there are a lot of organizations from different communities like Hispanic Access Foundation, Outdoor Afro, and so it's a really diverse coalition.
Thanks, Amy. How are we on time, Todd?
We're good. We've got, yeah, we're good.
And I've got one more question from Brooke, who says, do we have a list of funded projects by district? And I know we have that list by county, Amy. And where can people access that?
So the federal side projects, I sent a link that you guys will receive after the fact that has the Illinois fact sheet on the LWCF Coalition website. Because there are so many state and local grants projects, we're not able to fit those on a fact sheet like that. But I can certainly, you know, share the list that we have. I don't think it's by congressional district, unfortunately, it's by county. So we haven't had the resources to crosswalk that across the many thousands of projects. But I would be happy to, you know, follow up with folks individually to provide additional resources.
Yeah, and maybe that's something IEC can help with too. If there's a useful reason to have those by district, we can put that in the GIS pretty quick. He says county's fine. Good deal. So then Ted asked, does this just touch on access and recreation, or could nature-based solutions or climate change fall under LWCF? And I know there was some planning projects that were granted, right, Amy? So
yeah, there's some planning projects, some planning efforts that the state grants support, but also definitely natural infrastructure is something that LWCF definitely can help with. A lot of these forest protection projects are incredibly good investments in clean, safe drinking water as opposed to gray infrastructure. As well as there are floodplain, you know, conservation projects and wetlands conservation projects that are incredibly important in terms of like helping mitigate extreme weather and control quantity and quality of water. So and I think, you know, more and more of the state and local grants are going toward urban projects that park projects and natural infrastructure projects that incorporate, or projects that incorporate natural infrastructure into the park system in urban areas. So there's a variety of ways that, you know, we often say that the thing that that Congress could do right now to really help both mitigate and adapt to climate change would be to pass full permanent funding of LWCF.
Great. All right, maybe one more. Does U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service receive a consistent annual appropriation from LWCF?
Yes, all the 4 federal agencies submit a list of priority acquisition projects, and Congress ultimately determines the mix, like how much goes to Fish and Wildlife Service versus the Park Service versus the state and local grants. But all 4 agencies consistently, Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, Park Service, and the Bureau of Land Management consistently receive annual appropriations to acquire their priority in-holding parcels, and also, recreation access projects.
Great. All right, I think we're ready to turn it over to Alex and switch gears a little bit to talk about the 30 by 30 campaign. But if you guys have any other questions for Amy or IEC, feel free to drop those in the chat and we will get back to you over email, or if there's time at the end, maybe we'll get to them. You can go right ahead, Alex. You're muted. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me on here. I really appreciate it. So I'm with the League of Conservation Voters, and we see our work with Amy and others in the LWCF Coalition, which we're all in to get across the finish line, as you just heard from Amy. We see that work really as part of a bigger, far more ambitious conservation agenda that we've got to protect 30% of the United States land and ocean by 2030. And I'm excited to talk to you about that campaign today. Before getting to that goal, I think let's check in on some of the recent trends that we've seen in nature conservation. I'm going to share my screen with you here in just a second. What's been happening here in the United States. So a couple of years ago, a group called Conservation Science Partners did a really groundbreaking mapping project to see the extent of natural area loss in the lower 48 states between the years 2001 and 2017. And what they found was that 24 million acres of natural area were lost to some kind of development, everything from like urban sprawl to housing subdivisions to energy development to roads to agriculture to logging. And what it amounts to is that on average, every 30 seconds or so, the US is losing a football field worth of natural area. But if that trend continues, by 2050, we're going to have lost natural area the size of the state of South Dakota. And so that's a pretty alarming trend that we're seeing here in this country. But the trends that we're seeing here are very similar to what we're seeing internationally. 3/4 of the planet's lands and 2/3 of its ocean have been significantly altered by human activities. That's from a report came out about a year ago from an international scientific body that famously concluded that something like 1 million species are at risk of extinction around the world, partly due to the encroachment on wildlife habitats. Now, it's going to take a number of strategies to deal with what folks are calling either a nature crisis or a biodiversity crisis, or just simply kind of one part of the overall, climate crisis that we're facing. But one of the key ways to address these issues is simply to preserve more land and water in a natural state. And that's why you're seeing a growing number of scientists and others kind of coalescing behind the idea of protecting at least 30% of the Earth's land and ocean by 2030, on the way to preserving 50% by 2050. Folks may know E.O. Wilson had a book called Half Earth, calling for that 50% protection goal. So how much land and ocean have we protected in the United States? Well, this is definitely a question about how you define protection. The Center for American Progress in DC has done some of the best work in this space, and the figures in the slide in front of you are taken from an analysis of data from the International Union for Conservation of Nature's World Database on Protected Areas, and they also use data from the Marine Conservation Institute for the Marine Protected Areas. And so by their definitions, the US has protected 12% of its land. And the good news on the land side of things is that 60% of the land in the US is still in a natural state or could be plausibly restored to that state. So there's a lot of room for us to expand protections from the current 12% and get up to 30%. As you see, we've only strongly protected 1% of America's ocean outside of the areas in the Western Pacific, out past Hawaii. So definitely a lot of room there to protect more of the ocean, particularly off the continental United States. And you see there that Illinois is at about 3% of its land protected. Now, to be clear, in order for the U.S. to reach that 30% target, it doesn't mean that each state has to reach 30%. Some states could protect more, others could protect less, but all states can do their part to increase their protections and get us collectively to 30%. So, and the great thing is that we've all got a role to play in expanding natural area protections, from the federal government to state governments to local government, tribal governments, even private landowners. So as we're going about this campaign, we absolutely should make the case for the need and benefits of protections for more natural areas, but the specific places that we're going to actually protect are really going to be determined by folks on the ground who want their part of the country protected, folks like you guys doing this work out on the ground. Another principle is that, you know, for too long in this country, land use and natural resource policy has systematically harmed indigenous and communities of color, everything from land theft to depriving certain communities, oftentimes low income and communities of color, of nearby green space. And so we've got to pursue this conservation work going forward in a way that yields a more equitable distribution of nature's benefits. The campaign is also supportive of things like conservation easements that allow private landowners to preserve natural areas that they own. And as always, our credibility in large part is going to be based on adhering to sound science as a basis for our policy recommendations. So who's on board with 30 by 30? As you can see, there's growing momentum here in the United States. Among voters, we've seen numerous polls taken showing that everyday people really like the idea of setting a big national conservation goal like 30 by 30. In Congress, we now have resolutions in both the House and the Senate that are picking up co-sponsors. All of the major Democratic presidential candidates, including folks like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Mayor Pete, all endorsed a goal of 30 by 30, and Vice President Biden has it in his climate plan. Across the country, we've got 180 NGOs and businesses that have signed on, and then we've got a movement at the state level to push 30 by 30 at that level. And we've got a bipartisan resolution introduced in South Carolina, as well as one in California. So making progress across the country. Just want to say a word about messaging on 30 by 30 during the pandemic. And you heard some of this from Amy on the LWCF messaging. Of course, we're seeing families are really turning to nature for coping and exercise during the pandemic. It really points to the need for more open spaces where people can get outside with social distancing. But as I noted, we're facing a real mass extinction of wildlife and disappearing natural areas. Some of the stats that I read off at the start. And so this collapse of nature is really increasing the risk of pandemics and other disasters. And that's because research has shown that nearly 2/3 of infectious diseases originate in animals, including COVID-19, Ebola, and a number of others. And that when humans encroach on natural areas and exploit wildlife, including through the wildlife trade, it's breaking the barriers between humans and disease-carrying animals. And so some of this habitat and biodiversity loss is disrupting ecosystems that have naturally regulated diseases and protected human health. We see all the benefits that nature gives us, from clean drinking water, clean air, healthy food supplies, but one that folks may not necessarily be thinking about is the biodiversity that protects us from disease, and that's the source of so many cures in medicine. So we think there's definitely a way to continue to talk about this issue even during a pandemic. And in fact, protecting nature may be more important than ever at this time. So what does success look like in 2021 here? So the way we're thinking about it is that the more momentum and support that we build for 30 by 30 and the need for that ambitious conservation agenda, the more it puts pressure on elected officials at all levels of government to increase their ambition when it comes to protecting nature. So scenario A is the scenario where Joe Biden wins the presidency. We've thus built up enough pressure to drive in 2021 ambitious conservation action at the national, state, and local level. Scenario B is the one where Joe Biden has lost, but we've built enough pressure to drive far more ambitious conservation action at the state and the local level. And in a lot of ways, I think this campaign is similar to efforts you may have seen to achieve 100% clean energy. We're not seeing progress on that issue at the federal level, but that campaign earned the support of candidates for governor's office and state legislatures who won and then took control of their states in 2018. And now a bunch of states have passed landmark legislation, putting their state on a path to 100% clean energy. And the hope here is to ignite a similar movement for land and water conservation that's far more ambitious in the coming years than we would otherwise have without running a campaign like this. So what can folks in Illinois do? So I think first, if you like this campaign, if you like this idea, have your organization endorse the national 30 by 30 goal. We've got a national listserv going for it. You can get in touch with me or the folks at IEC to get you hooked into that campaign. We're also pushing federal, state, and local elected officials to endorse a national 30 by 30 goal. And they can do that in a number of ways, by issuing a statement, passing a resolution, co-sponsoring the congressional resolutions, etc. Even if folks aren't ready to talk about a 30 by 30 goal, they can still talk about the nature and extinction crisis that we're in. And we can get elected officials to talk about the need for more protections given the scale of natural area loss and the million species that are at risk of going extinct if we don't do more to protect nature and their habitat. We can also create more parks and open space, actually put more points on the board and actually get us on the path to 30 by 30. A number of states have been creating state offices of outdoor recreation to help promote the values of the outdoor recreation industry, which helps make the case for protecting more nature. And I think we've got about 13 states across the country who've started to do this. So that's something that the other states are really taking a look at. So with that, I'm just going to leave you with my contact info if you want to get in touch, and then share just a hub for 30 by 30 resources at natureamerica.org. So thanks for everybody's attention here, and let me turn it back to Lindsay for next steps here.
Yeah, so we're just gonna, if anyone has any questions for Alex, feel free to drop them in the chat. I want to remind everyone that we are going to send out a follow-up email with all of these links and resources, including this 30 by 30 resource hub. Does anyone have any questions about the 30 by 30 campaign, or maybe just some insight in on how your organization is looking to get involved, or maybe already involved? Andrew wants to know, he's with Open Land, was there federal or philanthropic support for establishing state offices of recreation?
That's a good question. I don't think I've been involved enough in one of these state level campaigns to know, but Andrew, I obviously know you, so happy to get back in touch with you on that.
Yeah, and then Sarah's asking how the 30% figure was established.
It's a good question. I wish I were a scientist, but it seems to be something that a lot of scientists are sort of coming together on to believe that would provide us with a sort of level of habitat protection, and especially if you did it in a way that preserved corridors and accounted for sort of changing climate and adaptation and stuff that might allow for us to avoid the sort of levels of extinction that we're kind of facing at this point. But we can definitely share some of the more scientific resources with the group to help people who want to dig in on that.
Yeah, I think I've seen the white paper or blog post that maybe Nature Conservancy and Sierra Club were working on. But yeah, we have that, and we'll get it out about why that 30% figure is agreed upon. And it's part of a, you might have said this, Alex, while I was thinking, it's part of a larger worldwide number, right?
That's right. That's right. There's a whole international campaign to get the Convention on Biological Diversity to take up an amendment to preserve 30% of the world's land and ocean by 2030, and a number of countries have gotten on board with that. Not something we expect the Trump administration to put the U.S. on board with, but it's definitely an international effort in a big way.
Super cool. Carrie asked if you're connected with the Land Trust Alliance relevancy campaign.
I am not personally. I don't know if others are.
So I don't know what the relevancy campaign is specifically, but the Land Trust Alliance is also a national leader within the LWCF Coalition, which I should have mentioned earlier.
So Robert asks, he says, Amy indicated that the president supported permanent funding of LWCF and National Park System maintenance, which he did. Why do we need then different national scenarios depending on who is elected?
So Alex might want to comment more on this, but I'll start. I was actually thinking about this when you were presenting those true scenarios, Alex. So the president is supportive of permanent funding of LWCF, although that kind of is very recent, and there's been a lot of kind of mixed messages coming out of the administration. So I don't know how much we can count on that. We're hoping that it sticks long enough to get this done. I would say that, you know, depending on who's elected, that vision for going beyond LWCF permanent funding to 30 by 30 might not be supported by the Trump administration, but it could be supported by both parties nationally in Congress, regardless of who's elected. So I think there's room for growth in national support, regardless of who's elected, but certainly the fact that it's part of Mr. Biden's campaign documents really puts that on a different level and indicates that there would be more immediate action if he were elected.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say we've got a great policy window right now to get LWCF done for all the reasons that Amy's laid out in terms of Republican support and the president sort of eagerly awaiting a bill like this. So I think we've got a window, but and we're doing everything we can to get it done. Biden is supportive of LWCF, and we would have another moment, but we don't want to lose the moment we're in right now. So. But then on the larger and far more ambitious conservation agenda, we do have Joe Biden on board with 30 by 30. And so, you know, that signals a real commitment to using a lot of tools that the federal government has in terms of the vast acreage that they own in the West and other places, right? And so he's going to have an Interior Secretary and a Forest Service Director and others who are going to have to look at that 30 by 30 goal that the president has laid out and start to figure out, well, what can we be doing to put us on that pathway to 30 by 30? And so it could mean a far more ambitious conservation agenda from the executive branch. But also this is a thing where if we build up the support for broader land and water conservation ambition, then that's something we can see those benefits at the state level in Illinois. We can see it at the county level. We can see it at the local level, right? If elected officials at all levels are saying we need to do more, well, great. You ask them, well, what are you going to do within your jurisdiction? You know, what are you going to do within your county to protect more open space? So that's why we see this campaign sort of lifting a lot of votes.
I would say also that, you know, despite the current administration's support for LWCF permanent funding right now, their support for continued aggressive energy development, both onshore and offshore, certainly would be an obstacle to a more ambitious plan like 30 by 30.
No doubt.
All right, is there any other questions for either of our speakers before we move on to just maybe some follow-up from IEC? How about just some feedback if this is either of these initiatives are something that you and your organization are interested in getting more involved with, throw those in the chat. Just make our day a little bit. And then while you guys do that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, Todd, and I'm just going to, oh, we've got some students very interested. I'm going to go through some of the resources that we'll be sending out later and some of the things. I know you're all sitting there thinking, what can I do right now as soon as this webinar is over? So I'm going to give you some action steps, and then we will send on some resources. But I'm going to share my screen and go through some of those resources. Good. I'm hearing the Open Lands. Carrie is very interested in signing on 30 by 30. Good. So I'm just going to share. We are going to send out some of these resources to you, but I just wanted to click through some of these where you can get access to some of this information. This is the Land and Water Conservation Fund Coalition website, and it has, oh, if I can click up here, there we go. It has access to all of these tools. So we'll be sending out the link, the Great American Outdoors fact sheet, the LWCF general fact sheet, and there's an Illinois specific fact sheet that looks like this. And so this has some of the larger federal programs. We'll also be sending out that list of local projects by county that Brooke was interested in. So this is just a really nice Illinois-based fact sheet. And then we also have some things that you can do. You can sign on as an Illinois partner that supports the Land and Water Coalition or the Land and Water Conservation Fund. We will send this out right after, and this is kind of IEC's effort to collect all of our partners that we know are doing this work and just may not have officially put their name out as someone who's really supportive of this. There's the state fact sheet. We've got some social media sample guidance for 30 by 30 that we'll be getting to you and kind of capturing some really Illinois specific social media, sample tweets, sample images, graphics, things that you can use in your own social media campaigns. The LWCF Coalition has a lot of this already, but we are going to work on getting some Illinois specific for both of these. We'll get all of that out to you. For the Land and Water Conservation Fund, I know when I was looking through who's on today, I know that we have a lot of land trusts, a lot of conservation organizations, a lot of really local groups that have these fantastic relationships with their local papers, their local media, and their local decision makers. So a really big ask from you, it might not be that big for you because I read your guys' letter to the editors all the time and they're fantastic, is to do a letter to the editor in your local paper about why the Land and Water Conservation Fund is important locally. Maybe specifically which projects in your county have been affected, some things that the folks that read your papers would really care about. So that's something we encourage you to do, and we offer all of IEC's communications staff. I haven't told them yet, but they are more than willing to help think through messaging and copy edit those for you and help you get through the steps if you're willing to take on writing a letter to the editor. Another thing you can do is this Great American Outdoors Act letter of support. We'll be sending out that link. And that is for the federal Great American Outdoors Act bill. That's way bigger than just Illinois supporters, right, Amy? So that would just be getting our folks on. I've sent that out before to our open space listserv and our vital lands listserv, so you may already be on it, but double check. We have one for Illinois conservation partners. I showed off that fact sheet a little bit ago. And then if you have a relationship with your legislators, you're always encouraged to contact them and express your concern, support, thank them for any support they've already given. Reiterating again that we'll get this all out to you folks following up from the webinar. Well, I appreciate you guys all taking an hour out of your day and tuning in. I'm really looking forward to organizing the conservation community around both of these. I'm really looking forward to 30 by 30 because I think it really aligns a lot of our goals and gives something that we can kind of serve as the backbone to a lot of our varied conservation goals that we have as different organizations. LWCF is the same way. It's just a little more, a little further in the process. So there's some concrete things we can do there. I appreciate you all tuning in.